Asking guests to pay towards your Italian wedding is okay, and I'm going to tell you why in this episode. Ciao, I'm Lucy. I'm an Italian wedding planner and I'm the founder of Lista.com, the website that helps you plan your Italian wedding with calm and confidence. I'm here every week with an episode to help you plan your wedding. I really want you to have a good time planning your wedding. So when you have an Italian wedding, it's really common to rent somewhere for a few nights and invite some of your guests to come and stay. Now, often people invite their closest friends and family, maybe their bridal party. Those are the people that are going to stay with you on site. But even though they're your really close friends and family, it can be really uncomfortable asking people to stay and pay for their stay and managing how all of that money works. So I'm going to try and break down for you what I see most commonly happen at my Italian weddings. So getting this right starts right at the beginning when you choose your venue. Obviously, the price of your venue is a really important factor within your budget anyway. But if you work out how many guests can stay at the venue that you shortlist, and by that I mean literally map out who is going to go in each bedroom before you book your venue, because a venue might have 40 beds, but actually the way that the rooms break down and the way that your friends are coupled up and things like that may mean that you may not maximize the actual location. So you need to know exactly how many people are actually going to fit in the venue and divide the total venue cost by that number. Then you have the cost per person or per room per stay. Once you've got that figure, you can work out if that's going to be affordable for your guests, and also if that's going to be an amount that you actually want to charge them and ask them for. So those two things together will help you work out whether you should actually book your venue. If the price is too much per person or per night, per room, whatever, then you may need to look for another venue, or you may need to think about subsidizing your location so that you can still have your dream venue, you're charging an amount that you feel comfortable with to your guests, but equally you're picking up some of the slack because you really want that venue. You can only get this right at the start when you pick your venue. If you try and calculate this further down the line, then you could obviously get into issues where you've got to ask people for too much money, more than you feel comfortable with, more than they feel comfortable with, but equally you may have to pick up some of the slack, which will impact the rest of your budget and what you're able to deliver for your wedding. The next bit is getting the communications around this right. So in Italy, in Italian weddings, often I see people send a save the date, but the save the date has a little bit more information than maybe it would for an at-home wedding. So your save the date may say, for example, that there's 3 days of events and that you may want an early RSVP to get a really good indication of the numbers for your wedding. It might not be a hard RSVP, but it's a good start. When you send the save the date out, if you have already mapped who is going to be in the key wedding location, then maybe you can have a slightly different save the date for them, just an extra bit of information that maybe a room is held for them at the wedding venue and you'll be in touch in the future with more details on that. Or my advice, if you've got this organised, in fact, I'd say get organised before you send the save the date so that this bit is done way in advance of your wedding and that you can therefore feel most calm and settled. Add a kind of insert into this save the date with these details. So you have an A and a B. Your A list is save the dates with this insert that says something along the lines of, we have held a room for you at the venue, this is the price, and these are the kind of terms and conditions. So they need to know where they're going to send the money, when a deposit is going to be due, and when the final balance is going to be due. Now, regardless of when you do this, it's quite a lot of work for you. It's quite a lot of work to map everyone out, to track how much you're going to take from everybody, to build up or to write all of the communications that go out. But it has to happen at some point. So my argument is that it's much better to do this at the start, because then it's done for you and it's clear, and you also get those responses so you know that you can actually fill the rooms, that the people you've invited to stay at the villa are going to be on board with it, and that you can kind of get ahead in your planning. You're calm, you know that you've covered the cost of your villa or the costs that you've asked people to pay for. One complication here is that different venues may ask you to pay in different ways. So some venues will be on board with the guests paying individually for their rooms. So you might have to put the guests in contact with the venue much nearer the wedding and they will pay the balance of their rooms. This is quite uncommon though, and the most common scenario is that you're paying for everything. So you have a contract with the venue and you have to pay the deposit, and then you pay a second instalment at some point and a third instalment near the wedding. So Again, there's some thinking to be done here. You've got to know when those instalments are going to be and think about your cash flow so that you're able to pay what is usually quite a big amount of money at those different times. So again, here comes the plan. So you have sent that save the date out, you've invited your guests, you've told your A-list that they've got a room. Hopefully lots of them have accepted. If anyone hasn't, you've been able to fill that room and move that guest somewhere else, or you've been able to subsidise their room potentially if there's someone that you really, really want at the site. Then you need to think about when you need this deposit from people. So these deposits are going to add up and potentially be your second instalment to the venue. So you know you need that money in the bank to be able to send it to the venue. So you just need to time that and make it an appropriate time where you think your guests have had long enough to think about it or save up the deposit, but it's at the right time for you to be able to get your cash flow right and pay for the things that you need to pay for. Same comes with the final payment. You need to make it at a time when you know that you need that income so that you can pay the final balance of the venue. Some venues need paying 3 months before the wedding date, so time it around that. That will all be, or should all be, in your venue contract. So there are other things that people ask guests to pay for when it comes to an Italian wedding. The main thing that I'm on board with is food. So if you're renting somewhere that's self-catering, you could include breakfast as part of a service that you offer your guests. You could include other meals, you could include a supermarket shop, a drinks delivery, just so that you know that everyone is catered for throughout the stay. Some couples add all of this up and include this in the cost that they charge for the venue so that it's all clear from the start. You know that your guests are going to be catered for. You're not going to have to kind of add something else to the budget further down the line to look after them and allow for them, and it's all grouped in to that total price that you're going to be charging them for your venue. I think it's also important to do this really early, at the early stage. You could even just forecast X amount per person at that first stage where you're working out whether your venue is affordable for you, but I think it's a must. Okay, and here's the bit that you may not want to hear, but I am not on board with charging guests for other events or transport on the whole. And that is because I think you have invited your guests for 3 days of events potentially, and it's okay, they're paying for their travel, they're paying for the accommodation. But if you are choosing to have other events that you invite people to, then I think that you should be paying for them. So it's out of the guest's hands as to whether, you know, they're coming to your wedding, they're coming to your events. I don't think they should necessarily pay for them, but hear me out. There are other ways around this. So if you want to get everyone together for other events and you cannot afford to cater and pay for drinks for them, then don't. Book somewhere like a bar or a service that means that guests are able to pay their way, but in a more informal way. So if you go to a bar, for example, and everyone's together, people will naturally buy their own drinks. They will naturally get themselves there if it's in a convenient location like a town that you know that most of your guests are staying in. Getting everyone to your venue for a full-blown event with catering and food and asking everyone for like €40 per person, I think that's a slightly different story. And I've personally seen that that's harder for you to manage as a couple, asking people for that. I've seen guests and couples get quite uncomfortable with that scenario. But equally, it is a lot for you to manage, knowing who's paid what, how that all works together. So again, when you're planning up front, think about what you can afford early on and then create your events to suit that, so that you haven't got these extra complications, because it may not sound like too much work, but actually when you're in it, I've seen couples, when you're in it, when you're managing all these different people, all these different comms, all these different little bits of money that you've got to get here and there, it's actually very complicated and stressful, and you could do without it. So in my membership, the club, I've got loads more information on this. I've got a full comms plan, I've got loads of details on finances, how to track it, and loads of helpful spreadsheets that are all included for my members to help you keep on top of all of these things. So if you like this advice, there's loads more in loads more detail in the membership. And don't forget, it really helps us if you subscribe, like, or comment below. It helps us reach more couples that are planning their Italian weddings, and hopefully you'll agree this advice is what everybody needs to hear. I'll see you next time.